Hi, I'm Chuck, and this is Lazarus Recovery YouTube, and this is hopefully the final take of the lesson on the bucket and the privy. Just to introduce the lesson, was originally a CR lesson, and what I wanted to do was I thought of preparing to work on the steps, and that's always a bit of a problem, and I think we always want it to be easy and clean and nice, and we don't think that recovery is difficult. But so the lesson was using some backdrops, and hopefully, if I'm lucky, somewhere there's going to be a picture of privy, an original privy that was that I built as a child. I'm obviously not a child anymore, with my dad at a property up in northern New Hampshire, and hopefully there'll be a picture of that one. And the story, basically, the privy, to introduce the lesson, is we bought a piece of property and we were going to camp on it, and we needed obviously a place to a privy, and so we designed or built a privy and then carried it up north, and my dad and I put it together on a weekend when we were up there. And in the privy we put a chemical toilet, which was basically a bucket, and set a bucket inside a throne, and we'd go to the toilet in there, and then we'd had chemicals in it and stuff like that, and then every once in a while we had to dump it. And so dumping it was always an interesting thing, and that's what I was thinking about when I designed this lesson, because it was always a circus to do that. I can remember I wish I had a movie, because it was always a circus to do that. And what we did was my dad would lift the bucket out, and it was heavy, and it was hopefully not too full, and he'd take it out, lift it out, and carry it and walk it down a trail to a hole that I dug, a big pit that I dug. And there was always it wasn't a pretty situation, it was a bucket of stuff, and you'd move around and it would slosh a little bit, and my mom would, "Bud, be careful," and then it would be no sloshing. It was a horror show if it was sloshed all over the place. And then you'd get to the pit, and you'd sort of stand back and lean forward at the same time and pour the bucket into the pit. Well, it wasn't like liquid completely, forgive me, but it was a mixed bag, and so there was a little bit of like dancing around and avoiding the sloshes and the stuff like that. So it was like, "Bud, be careful." It's like, "Oh my God, it's this, that, and everything." But it was hilarious, and it was funny, and it was memorable. Obviously, I was a kid there. I was like 13 or 14, and it was a memorable thing. We did it 2 or 3 times a summer, and we did it at the end to clean it up for the winter. And it had to be done. You couldn't let the bucket fill too full, or you just couldn't get it out of the toilet, and you couldn't carry it, and God forbid you spilled it and stuff like that. So it had to be done on a regular basis. And that's the story. That's the backstory of the privy. The bucket is, I use this bucket in the lesson, and you say, "That's a pretty dirty bucket." That's the point. As I've used it for a lot of stuff. Soda, dumping sodas out, doing a bunch of stuff. And it's dirty, and it's a mess. Well, the problem with it is, when you get in recovery, we want to think that we want to look good in recovery. We do terrible stuff when we're using and doing stuff. But when we get better, we want to look good. We want to be. That's not always possible. Recovery is a dirty business, and it takes humility. And we got to be willing, when we need to carry the bucket out. We got to be willing to understand that we can't pretend from day one we're a clean bucket. If you're in a Christian part of recovery, I think in a Christian part of recovery, I think the tendency is to want to be in recovery but be undercover. In other words, you go to the recovery meeting, but you don't want anybody in the church to see that you're going to a recovery meeting. You know, you want to be able to go to the social hour after church and look like everybody else. I'm finished, dude. I'm finished. I'm a Christian. I'm finished. I'm perfect. I'm this and that. And that's a bit of a problem, because we got to come to grips with the fact that, you know, we got stuff. We're Christians. We're forgiven. We're called to follow Him. But you can't pretend you're a clean bucket when there's stuff here. And that's what recovery is about. You got to have the humility to understand that you're a dirty bucket. You got to have humility to understand that you know, you're the same as everybody else, especially in recovery. You know, there's no cleaner than the other. We got to sort of understand that even when we're Christian, we've been here a few years, we still have some stuff to work out. We still need to work on the container of the stuff that we carry around. And we can't pretend. We can't pretend that we're perfect. You know, Jesus sees us as perfect because He died to make us perfect. But we can't fool ourselves to believe we're perfect. We've got to show people that we're working the way they are. And they'll see Jesus through us if they see the broken parts of us. But a lot of times we pretend we're done, you know, and a lot of times we're just, you know, we're overcooked. You know, when I was a kid, I went to a Boy Scout thing, and they had a test on it overnight, and it was to cook dough. And the tendency was to hold it too close to the fire and want to cook it really quick, so you'd get the outside really brown and almost black, and then they forced us to eat it. And a lot of times the dough was black on it, well done on the outside, and mushy and cold on the inside. And we Christians sort of we want to look done and finished on the outside, and really inside we're not even half baked. Forgive me, half baked. So, unfortunately for us, you know, a lot of Christians want to see the half baked on the outside and don't want to deal with the other stuff on the inside. But we, as people who are getting better one day at a time, we just have to live in reality. We have to be cooked well, not cooked badly. So, anyway, the lesson is about the privy and the bucket. Now, what does that mean about your recovery? Your recovery is something you're responsible for, but you can't do yourself. God's responsible for the work, but you're responsible for the sweat equity. And that's what you need to understand. And you got to understand when you get into it that you're not making the Exodus and the crossing of the Red Sea. You're making one step at a time, and it ain't necessarily going to be pretty. You know, you have to be able and willing to carry the stuff, the privy bucket out to the pit and dump it. And that's the steps. That's what you do in the steps. You lift it up and you look at it and say, yeah, this is stuff from a privy. And you got to carry it out and dump it. And that's the steps. And you say, I don't like the steps. Well, my dad didn't like carrying a privy out. I didn't like digging a hole. Nobody liked it. But if we didn't, we couldn't stay there. And you ain't got no place to go if your privy overflows in your life. You got to live with it. So I suggest that you just get used to the idea that you have to dump your privy bucket on a regular basis, and that's working the steps. If you're in recovery and you're say, I'm just a Christian, I don't have to do recovery, then I got news for you. You're going to be that dough that's overcooked and not done in the middle. You know, and you're anytime somebody bites into you, they're going to get uncooked dough in the center. You know, you've got to dump the bucket on a regular basis. You've got to dump the bucket on a regular basis. You got to work the steps. You got to be active. You got to know people and be open and honest with them. That's what I suggest. And finally, you know, in the other prop, the dirty bucket. You have to be upright and honest with people. If you're in recovery, honesty is everything. You know, you can't play a game in recovery, because a lot of us in recovery are one drink away or one drug away from dying. Some people are one bite away from a food bender or an institution stay or something like that. So we need to be honest and open with ourselves and the people that we trust. And that's what it is. You can't pretend, well, I changed my mind. You can get away with pretending in church.